YouTube Ozzy in the Godows is back, ranking every NFL playoff team from 14 to 1, not based off the regular season. Do not care what teams did in the regular season. It is based off the playoffs and what they are capable of in the playoffs, and that only. So excited about this. There's more than just that, though. Twitter subscribers put together their rankings. I combined them, averaged them out, so we'll see the fan playoff rankings as well. And at the end of this video, we'll have our final regular season power rankings, and we'll see where each team was ranked for me going into the season, so that'll be fun. I already tweeted that graphic out, actually, but a lot to go over, a lot of rankings to go over in this video. Excited about it. We got all kinds of content rolling out, and even off-season content. Excited about this stuff. Like, subscribe to No Gains On, follow us on Twitter. A lot of coaching news going on right now. We're talking about that on Twitter. A lot of takes on there. Sponsors, Liquid IV, GLD Shop, code GOAT, links pinned in the comments. Who's coming in at 14? It's unfortunately for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And these are my rankings we're going to start with, then we'll go to the fan rankings. And again, this is not, I don't care what teams did in the regular season. Do not care. Playoffs a different ball game. This is based off what I think they are capable of in the playoffs, how they stack up against the field. I don't care who they play in the first round. It's not chances to win in the first round, the wild card round. None of that. Just how are they as a playoff team? Who is best built to win in the playoffs? So the Steelers coming in at 14. They got hot. They're pretty hot right now at the right time. Mason Rudolph playing well. I mean, they would have a better record if they didn't mess around with Mitchell Trubisky, but they did. But they're playing pretty solid on both sides of the ball. I do think TJ Watt being out, very, very likely out for this week. He'll be back if they win this playoff game, maybe against the Bills. He'll be back. I'm saying he maybe will be back if they win this playoff game against the Bills. But that factors in too, because for at least a game for the playoffs, they're not going to have TJ Watt. So that it's their best player. I love the way Najee Harris is playing right now. He's running the football very well. Mason Rudolph's playing solid. He's getting the weapons going. I just don't. Stacking up against the rest of the teams, they possibly could have more balance. They do. They might have more balance than other teams, but are they necessarily like super explosive somewhere? Or what's like the takeover part of their team? Usually it's TJ Watt. Again, there's other good players, but are they necessarily super good on offense or defense? That's kind of their issues here. I think teams aren't going to light their defense up, but they're gonna move the ball on them in the playoffs. And offensively, they're not a huge threat. Even though Najee Harris, again, he's really impressive lately. Just based off recently, looks like one of the better backs in football. Now, is he in general? People probably argue against that, but that's where I'm at with the Steelers, who kind of squeaked into the playoffs. Even though, again, kind of deserving the way they pushed, and if they would have had Rudolph instead of Trubisky, they might be a better seed right now. 13, I'm going to go with the Packers. Interesting team. My worry with them is their defense, and now my worry with them the last couple of weeks has been the defense, and they've kind of proved me wrong in those specific games the last 2 weeks. But they played the Vikings, obviously with their situation, and the Bears. So it's going to be a little bit different, as we stack them up with the playoff teams, which this video is, and that's all that matters here in the playoffs. So I do worry about their defense. I do think their defensive front is pretty good, mainly Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, guys like that. Maybe Alexander being back in the mix, he can kind of get, healthier and play better and better here. I guess that's possible. Jordan Love's been extremely impressive. That's one for the future for sure. Well, maybe one for right now, really, the way he's playing. Offensive line's playing better. Young weapons playing well. Aaron Jones looks good and healthy, and when he's healthy, he's really good. So, they could be a little bit of a threat with that offense. They have a pass rush, but I do worry about their defense. I think, when they match up against most of these playoff teams, they're pretty much going to have to win in a shootout. Talking about pretty much all these playoff teams. And their offense is, I'd say, capable, but can they really outscore some of these teams in the playoffs? So that's the way I look at it. And they're young. It's kind of, mainly at quarterback and receiver. It's kind of, a team that had their ups and downs. Like first half of the year, they actually, you could argue they were like a bottom 10 team in football. And then they picked it up. They looked really good. And they kind of went cold again for a little bit. And it was mainly because how bad that defense was. And even that was kind of somewhat recent. The Bucs game was a disaster. They got upset by the Giants before that. Defensively, it was a disaster against the Panthers, but they did win that game. So that's where I'm at with the Packers. But I guess they could be pretty sneaky. This isn't a round one matchup video, but specifically talking, if we want to talk about that Cowboys matchup, could they, just a scenario. They start with the ball, they pound the football, they run the clock, they score. They're actually pretty good at that. That can really change the whole game, and you could actually run the ball on the Cowboys. So that could be interesting. That's why I think they could be a little sneaky. 12, I'm going to go with the Buccaneers. They've been playing much better football down the stretch. And the last 2 games were a little interesting. But even in those games, the defense overall played a lot better than mid-season even. Offensively, they've had their moments of being pretty explosive. You look at the Packers game, they were kind of on a run, around that time, which was somewhat recent. They kind of stalled a little bit the last 2 games. I really do. I said that 2 weeks ago too. I really do believe maybe they were trying to hide some stuff for the playoffs offensively. I could be wrong, but a lot of teams do. I think teams do that more and more too. Teams do that whether you want to believe it or not. Was a little risky if the Bucs did decide to do that though, but I like their balance as well. I mean, a little bit more balance than the Packers, but I do worry. Baker's been better than expected. I've always liked Baker. I'm not a Baker hater. I'm not going to doubt him completely. But when it comes to the playoffs and playing against the best teams and teams with better rosters, will he play at that level that he absolutely needs to? It's going to be difficult. And defensively, they look like such a mess for a portion, mainly the pass defense, for a portion of the season. That in the back of my mind is still an issue. It's kind of similar to the Packers. Like lately, the defense has been playing better, but is that like the playoff defense, or is that just like how you're playing against the Vikings, the Bears, the Panthers, in this case with the Bucs? So those are the questions with those teams. I guess their defense, but they're all pretty much in the same boat there in terms of the rankings, not much splitting them up. Number 11, we're going to go with the Houston Texans, who 50-50 game in the first round. If you watch my full playoff predictions, it was the toughest game to pick for me. I actually picked the Texans, and we'll talk about the Browns and why I have them actually ranked ahead of the Texans, even though I have the Texans winning. But again, that's a 50-50 game. But the rankings are different than actual wild card predictions. But Texans are pretty young. That's kind of what they got going against them. Are they super strong on either side of the ball? No, but I do like their balance. And when CJ Stroud's on, he's really solid. Like they're good on both sides of the ball. So I do like their balance. DeMeco Ryans is not an experienced head coach, but experienced coach when calling that defense and game planning. So that's good as well. So again, I like the balance. They were sneaky in the regular season. They can be sneaky now. They're pretty solid, but they have a defensive line. They stopped the run at a high level, minus that Colts game. They still won. Yeah, again, what's going against them is the inexperience, especially at quarterback. Even though I'm a huge CJ Stroud guy, there could be that playoff rookie moments maybe that come up, perhaps. Play a tough defense in round 1 in the wild card round. But yeah, do they have anything that's going to absolutely take over, like something elite that's going to win them the game? Nico Collins also does. It feels like he has to carry the receiver group a little bit. Will that come into play? Been a little beat up recently. But that's where I'm at with the Texans. I got them at 11, but a lot of these teams are super close. And then I do have the Browns at 10. Now, head-to-head, I was leaning, and that's still one that I'm on the fence about. I was leaning towards Texans. I explained myself in my full bracket predictions, but I'll do it again in our weekly picks. But mainly the Texans being home and getting starters back this time against the Browns, and Browns has changed their game plan. It kind of plays mind games a little bit, but I do like their defense. But the difference between the Browns home and away has been different. So that kind of sums up my thinking. But I do think, the playoff, like ranking playoff teams, how do they stack up in the playoffs? How do they stack up against the other teams in the playoffs, not just one team? What are their chances of making a run? I would actually slightly put the Browns ahead of the Texans, even though I'm leaning Texans in that game. Looking at the second round, like for an example, could the Browns be a better matchup against the Ravens and the Texans? I think so. Could the Browns? I think the defense. I think they have that. Maybe what the Texans don't have. Again, the Texans defense is pretty solid. Texans offense, I'm probably going to trust a little bit more in the Browns offense. I guess that's debatable. But the Browns have that big time defense where I think that is something present that could cause other teams problems. So basically, I think they can beat more teams that are in the playoffs than the Texans, and that's what the rankings were. I didn't want to make the rankings comparison between two teams. I would disagree with if that's how you did that. You did the rankings, but so put the Browns at 10. That defense is dangerous, and the offense has been explosive recently. They got the turnovers have been there though, and that if you do that in, you're not playing them, and they barely escaped the Bears. They played the Texans with their backups. They played the Jets, so that you're not playing those teams in the playoffs. So if you have those turnovers, you're probably not going to win. They're missing a handful of guys. It's one of those teams. I think I said it in my bracket predictions. It's like people could have that oh yeah moment, that like that's right moment. Like if the Browns look bad at any time or get first rounded, they're going to go like, I guess, yeah, that's right. They're missing everybody. They have Joe Flacco, who has played good, but he just got there not too long ago. He's been turning the ball. Like, okay, people are going to go, okay, it kind of makes sense. So it could be an oh yeah team, if that makes sense there. But they could put up a fight. I really don't think the Ravens want to see the Browns. I would pick the Ravens in that game, but the Browns could make things interesting for the Ravens perhaps in the second round if that's a matchup. 9, I'm going to go with the Eagles, the toughest team to rank in this video. The toughest team to rank because they are playing pretty bad football right now. Out of all the playoff teams, and if you had to rank them based on how they are currently playing, and that's it, Eagles are probably 14. They're 14. They're dead last. Now, again, I don't want to get fooled by that. They very well could come out and continue to play like that. There is actually evidence that would say that they could, because plain and simple, they have not played great down the stretch against good teams. They're going to play good teams in the playoffs. The defense has been atrocious. They're a little beat up right now. Still, how close to 100% is Hurts? Sounds like it's not much of a worry. Where's A.J. Brown at, like, with his injury? I'd imagine Devontae Smith be back. So it's tough with the Eagles. I'd imagine because they have a great offensive line, they have a really good quarterback, they have the experience, they have star players here and there, they have units that can take over. Even on defense, it's been so bad, but the defensive line is really good. It's probably like the worst defense with the best defensive line that I've ever seen, maybe. So maybe it just clicks. We're like, hey, we're too good for this shit. Let's click it into gear. Let's get going. Could see it. I actually thought about ranking the Eagles higher, but there's some really good playoff teams, and I do really worry about the defense. I actually worry about the coaching. I worry about them not being 100% when it comes to maybe Hurts, but A.J. Brown, guys like that. So they are impossible to rank and to put I had a hard, like, it all came to me, like, with all these rankings, but the Eagles and the next two teams, well, mainly the Eagles caused the problems, and the next two teams that I'm about to show, I was kind of in a conversation with myself, like, do I put the Eagles in between these teams, ahead of these teams? So it kind of made it a little tricky. It's just, I don't want to get suckered into believing everything from the regular season, because that's really not how it works, but it's very possible they continue to play like that. Not an easy game against the Bucs in the first game, but crazy, like a few weeks ago, maybe a little bit more than a few weeks ago, you wouldn't think we'd be ranking the Eagles number 9, but I think a lot of people right now are probably ranking them worse, but then they're basing it off of the end of the regular season, like, which if you're basing it off of the most recent how they're playing, they're probably last, honestly, but I'm not going to do that. 8, I'm going to go with the Lions at 8. Really good season. Hype for them. Hype for the future. It's going to be crazy in that Rams game. Goff, Stafford revenge game in Detroit. That crowd's going to be crazy. That's a tough first-round match, especially when you're home. You think you get an easier one, but that's really not what these rankings are about, like the head-to-head. Lions are tricky as well. I do like that they can win by running the ball or passing the ball. I fully trust their running ability, their running game. Passing the ball is not always there. Goff is a little inconsistent, specifically against some zone coverages. Some teams have been figuring out a better way to game plan for him down the stretch. Like even the Bears defense gave him some problems. So he's got to be a little more consistent. Missed some throws that could have won him the Cowboys game. And I still believe they are much better in the first half of the year, which, again, it's not based off the regular season, but it does matter kind of like if you're hot, you're not, and they're winning some games right now. And if teams figured out a way to game plan for you, those things do kind of matter. They've struggled a little bit against the good teams down the stretch. In Packers, if you want to consider them a good team, they are in the playoffs, so I will. They struggle with them. They struggle with the Bears. That's really not even a good team. Cowboys game was close. The Vikings games were close. Both of them went exactly the same way. And those are games that really shouldn't be close given who has been out for the Minnesota Vikings. But again, we don't want to fully base things off that, but my point is it's still a little unknown how they will match up against the really solid teams. I would take most of the solid teams over them, like teams around their range, around their record, even a team under. And a big part of it is I said Goff has to be consistent, but that's really not my worry. A big part of it is the defense. This defense looks like Swiss cheese at times. It really does. Like teams really could air it downfield. There's guys running wide open. There's a lot of man coverage for having guys that I don't know if they're great in man coverage. Guys are just getting completely torched, and that really has been present against not the best teams in the world. So that's what I worry about there. Coaching either wins them games or loses them games. They gamble a little too much. I do think teams have kind of been figuring that out a little bit. So that's where I'm at with the Lions right now. Definitely one of the teams of the future, but the inexperience I think comes into play as well. So there's a team that's going to have to win in shootouts because I see it pretty much or almost every playoff team scoring a lot of points on them. Like I can't sit here and I thought about the Eagles below them. Like if they play like that, I think the Eagles their stars would get going and they probably would score a lot of points on the Lions, but the Lions would score a lot of points on them. So that was pretty damn close for me. And the Lions are playing better football right now, so I guess that was kind of the tiebreaker, even though that's not a huge thing. But the teams I have above them, like I'm pretty confident that they would all score a lot in the Lions, and then the Lions could keep up on them, but how many would they be able to, against? So that's where why I had the Lions at 8. The Dolphins at 7. Dolphins, Lions, Eagles are pretty much in the same boat. Very explosive offenses. Kind of worry about their defense a little bit. The team I worry about the defense the least is the Dolphins. That's pretty crazy given their injuries, and that is why they aren't ranked better than 7. They would be better. They would have a shot to be much better than 7 for me, but they don't have any pass rushers. That's how huge that is for big football games in the playoffs and making a run in the playoffs. They're pretty much running out of pass rushers. So that alone almost maybe had them even lower in this. And they're so explosive on offense. They're as explosive as some of the other teams we talked about. And even without the pass rushers, I trust their defense and their defensive coaching, actually. Even though it hasn't been lights out, I trust it more than some of the other teams that are in the same category with them. So that'd be the reason for, again, 7, 8, 9, they're pretty much the same teams almost. Some are playing better right now than others, but they're pretty much the same team. They have the same strengths. I mean, they're all explosive offenses. So Dolphins a little bit more dangerous to play against, I suppose. I also they're beat up, but I factored in that Mostert and Waddle are probably coming back. Those are big time players. Those are dangerous players to go against. So that was kind of a deciding factor there with some of those teams. Dolphins have some questions about playing against good teams as well as those other teams we just talked about. Number 6, I'm actually going to go with the Cowboys. It's a really good football team, and I picked the Cowboys to go to the Super Bowl before the year. I got called crazy, and maybe I am crazy. And I don't really have them going back to Super Bowl, but I think I don't have them going to Super Bowl but in my latest predictions, but I think they could. I think they're a good team, and I'm not one. This might seem like a low ranking because they are talented enough to be better than this because I love the balance. They have a really good defense. The run defense a little sus sometimes, and they have a really explosive offense. They can win, run, and pass. It's my type of team. Against the really good teams. That's my situation. In the top 6 teams are really good more than that maybe, are really good football teams. So that it's good that they're 2 seed. They're much different at home than away, so they get to play at home until they play unless they play the 1 seed. They're probably rooting for somebody to take down the Niners. If the Cowboys advance, maybe the Rams could take them down, perhaps. But and I'm not one to base it off in the past they choke in the playoffs, but I'm not going to sit here and say because they choke in the playoffs in different years, they're going to do it again, or I can't rank them high because of that. And I consider 6 a high ranking, but that's really not what it is. That's not really my style. But I do wonder about them against the really good football teams. Like they're going to take care of business against teams that they're better than, but they may not take care of business teams that they're like right around the same level or teams that are better than them. So that's kind of my thinking on the Cowboys, like a slight difference. I think they're a really good team. They're very close to being number 2. Like that's how, I'll say 3. That's how close this all is. Number 5, I'm going to go with the Chiefs. They've been playing pretty bad football recently. Again, if we wanted to base everything off of how they've recently played, the Chiefs would be much lower than 5, but we're not going to do that. Playoffs are a whole different game. Did the Chiefs have the best player in football this season specifically? No. Lamar Jackson was that best player. But do the Chiefs have the best player in football? Yes, they do. Patrick Mahomes is the best player in football. Chris Jones is up there for one of the best defensive players. Kelsey's one of the best players in football if he gets his head out of his ass. I think he's been, people talk about Mahomes being off. I think Kelsey's been off much more than Mahomes. But they can do that. Another big thing is, the offense has run through Matt Nagy a little bit. Interesting. And there's been some frustration. I think it'll run much more through Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. So that can just upgrade things completely just like that, right off the bat. That makes me want to put the Chiefs even higher. That makes me want to pick the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl again. I thought about it. They're that close to being a number one team for me. They are. But they just don't feel like the same team in the past. The receivers definitely aren't there. Rashee Rice has been impressive, but the receivers definitely have not been there. Kelsey looked like he's taking a step down. I am not worried about Patrick Mahomes at all. What he did in the regular season, I don't care. He's going to be just fine. Defensively, it's a similar defense of what it's been. Pretty tight in coverage, pretty well coached defense, an experienced coach in Spagnuolo. It's not like gonna shut teams down though. Early in the year they were doing that, but Frank Clark was always a monster in the playoffs. Will they miss that playoff presence from Frank Clark? Nobody probably talk about that, but I think they maybe will a little bit. So there still are some things there. Another thing, yeah, it's tough because you have the best player in football. You'll let him do his thing. I understand that, but they're actually a really good team running the football when they want to run the football. They don't always want to. They should probably run it more, but you play mind games with yourself because you're like, we got the best in football. If we're going to win it all, it's going to be through him. So you do want to have him with the ball in his hands as much as possible. But there's some of these teams in the playoffs that can't really stop the run, and Pacheco is a monster, and the team could actually run the football at a very high level if they choose to. So that they're tough. They're tough to rank as well. I could see them winning the Super Bowl again, even though I tweeted at some point with those receivers, it's not going to happen again. But they can really just throw everybody off by kind of tweaking things and having Andy Reid and Mahomes kind of more running things, though. So they're at 5. And this is where maybe I'll surprise people. The way I've been talking about the Rams, you should not really be surprised. And they could very well lose in the first round. They're underdogs. They're going to Detroit in a primetime football game, Goff revenge game, not just a Stafford revenge game. The Lions are supposed to be better, like based on how the teams look, or the predictions going into the year, how teams look maybe on paper. But I like the Rams. I love the way they play. They're playing football. They're probably the best coached, most well-coached team in football. The year they won the Super Bowl, I felt like I'm pretty confident they kind of saved some things, some tricks up their sleeves, had some things hit in the back pocket, for the playoffs. They could do it again with this. They really got going at the right time. Sometimes teams just getting clicking at the right times, the right thing. They're one of those teams. They could kill you with the passing game with Stafford. He was playing as good as anyone down the stretch. He's got that experience. He won a Super Bowl, been around for a long time. Cooper Kupp, healthy right now. Puka Nacua being a monster. Even Demarcus Robinson playing well. Higbee. They can beat you with the passing. You have to worry about so much. At first they were kind of a zone beating team, but Puka's been dominating against man defenses as well. We know Stafford could read man and torch man. Then you got that running game. You have probably the second best running back in football right now in Kyren Williams. They are so tough to game plan for because you have to worry about both. You have to play downfield because of that passing game. You have to worry about that run because how dominant it's been. And defensively, they don't look great on paper, to be honest, but some guys have stepped up. They have a great defensive coach in Raheem Morris. Reason he's getting interviewed for a head coaching job, and they have maybe the greatest defensive player in all time who can still be a major problem in Aaron Donald. So the defense is better than how it looks on paper. So I think it's a very balanced team. It's more so on offense is the better part, but how much they can stretch the field and how many different ways they can beat you is crazy. What could stop them? Where could I be wrong with this? Well, I'm going to look wrong if they lose in the first round, which they very well could. They're underdogs. But specifically, why could I be wrong about being this high on the Rams? I'd say two things. Number one, the obvious one would be durability. Matthew Stafford has had his past injuries. It could happen just like that. Kyren Williams has his injuries. Cooper Kupp. So guys like that would kill them. Losing one of those guys, that's it. Really. So offensive line was dropping like flies last year. So that's the thing with them. But the number two thing is, again, a lot of people didn't expect the Rams to be this good, including myself. I thought mainly because of durability, health, and they've overall been pretty healthy for the most part. For most of the season, I should say they've even had their been beat up. But most people doubted them a little bit because they almost gutted that defense. Like they got rid of key players. On paper, it does not look like a good defense. So they're better than they are. I think they'll be fine. But a reason that I could be wrong would be maybe that defense, like teams figured out, like, okay, they game plan for it, find out weaknesses. Like this defense is nowhere near as what it used to be, and they kind of expose weaknesses. Sometimes it happens in the playoffs, so that is a possibility right here, in the playoffs for the Rams. But I like how explosive they are. I like how dangerous they are, how sneaky they are, how they got hot at the right time, the many ways they can beat teams. So I'm going to put them in number 4. I think I said it. If they end up matching up with the Niners in the second round, I think the winner of that game is going to the Super Bowl. I'm actually pretty confident with that. If the Niners don't have to play the Rams, I'm fully expecting the Niners. I already have them in the Super Bowl, but if they don't have to play the Rams, I'm fully expecting the Niners to be in the Super Bowl, but we'll see. That's number 4. Number 3, I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bills, who I do have going to the Super Bowl, which I think is a bold pick because they're beat up. I do want to know more about, Rasul Douglas, Dotson, guys like this. Like how injured are they? They did get DaQuan Jones back, who was a monster earlier in the year. That's huge for the defensive front as he's going to get more and more involved, more and more into it, back into shape. So that's actually big, though. So they lose guys, but they gain him. But I do still want to, Gabe Davis might miss a game. They are playing my number 14th ranked team. It's not going to be a walk in the park, but I guess that helps. But they got to take care of the ball, and the play calling's got to be there too. It's been better with Joe Brady, but there's been games where they kind of repeat themselves, like run on first, throw on second, throw on third, or the runs is working wonders, and then they have a lead, and they go throw, and it's like, what are you doing? Run the ball. Get yards because it's working, and you run the clock. It's a bonus right there. So play calling could either be great or it could cost them. But this is another team where I love that there's so many different ways they can win. It's so tough to game plan for them because the number one thought when playing the Bills offense is got to be Josh Allen's deep ball, like in Stephon Diggs, and you have to worry about over the top. I can argue that some teams number one thing may be Josh Allen running the ball, but now how they have elevated themselves in terms of an actual rushing team with James Cook, it's taken them to another level. And they're not in the past. They were like they struggled to run the ball, but they're also like pass, and we'll run the ball here and there when it's working. Well, it doesn't matter, So they were effective at times running the ball, but they just didn't do it enough for teams to worry about it. Now they are actually doing it a bit, and that is really going to throw teams off. It's like, where do we focus? Where do we put our focus here? And you have a tight end duo. One is a mismatch. He's like a big receiver, and Dalton Kincaid. There's so many things you have to worry about, and that is my favorite thing about the Bills. And honestly, what could have them in the number 1 conversation, I think if they're healthier on defense, they probably would be. So would stop them, turnovers, coaching, possibly. In the past, the defense has looked like number 1 defense or a top 3 defense in the regular season and then shit the bed in the defense. And I've said why, and I've predicted why in the past. Because they're cover 2 all regular season. They get to the playoffs, they are cover 2, and everyone knows it. When it comes to the playoffs, it's all about the game plan. We're going to attack what we know about that team. We're going to attack their weaknesses. If teams know they're going to run that much cover 2, they're going to beat them. Anybody's going to beat them. Now, they don't have Leslie Frazier, who's a cover 2 fiend. Good defensive coach, develops players, but they don't have him anymore. They've been mixing up a little bit. I guess the issue is they have the players that fit that shell coverage defense, but they have been mixing it up a little bit more. Some man, some cover 3 in there. That could actually help them. It can make them less. I think they are less predictable now than they have been in the past. That's where I'm at with the Bills. And they're less predictable now than how they have been in the past on both sides of the ball, actually. So they can win the Super Bowl because of that. What's stopping them? I think mainly the health, missing some guys. Number 2, I'm going to go with the Ravens. It was tough between 1 and 2 because the Ravens did just dominate the Niners a couple weeks ago, but this wasn't a video of Ravens versus Niners. It was a video of ranking all the playoff teams. The AFC being tougher kind of comes into play here. Because how will the Ravens be against the Bills? Because the Ravens sometimes are a little interesting against the run. How will they be against the Chiefs? Against Patrick Mahomes in a playoff atmosphere? They struggled with the Browns. I'm not really worried about it, but they struggled with the Browns before. This is a little tougher games. The Ravens will probably be favoring all those games, but they are the most dominant team in the regular season. They had the most dominant defense. Lamar Jackson's the most dominant player. So this is a team that very well could be number one, that could win the Super Bowl because of that. Durability is number one for them. What could stop them? Because that's been an issue in the past. Another reason is they kind of couldn't really get over the hump in the past because teams game plan for them a little more properly. They go, all right, like Lamar could throw, and I'm a big Lamar guy, always been. I'm not one of those idiots that are like, Lamar can't throw downfield or he's not good or he's not. I think those people have kind of disappeared a little bit, thank God. I'm not one of those guys, but is Lamar, and mainly I shouldn't say Lamar, I want to say, is the Ravens passing game, because I don't think it's on Lamar if they're not, but is the Ravens passing game a Josh Allen Bills passing game? Is it a Chiefs Mahomes? Is it a Stafford Rams? Is it a Dak Prescott Cowboys even? It's not. And sometimes they're not even close. And I actually think it's more so because the receivers. Zay Flowers has really stepped up. He's been good, but they've been let them down at times, and it could let them down in the playoffs, and teams they don't really have to worry. They don't have to play back like those teams I just listed off. You got to stretch the field. You got to play over the top. You don't really do that. You take the chances against the Ravens here, and you focus on the run. You focus on containing Lamar Jackson. So there is a more proper game plan for every player, for every team in the playoffs. Doesn't mean they always get stopped. The great ones still overcome it. But there is a more proper game plan from several teams, all the teams maybe, from coaches for each team. So when teams properly game plan for them and they're in a situation where they have to hit a pass downfield consistently, can they do it? I'm going to say, yeah, they can. But can they do it as much, game after game into the Super Bowl? Those are the questions with the Ravens. But I think they by far have the best defense right now. They're a tough game plan because it's not that Greg Roman offense anymore. Remember they couldn't get over the hump with that. It's now the Todd Monken offense, so maybe that's all they needed to get over that hump and have a more consistent passing game in the playoffs and not be one-dimensional. So they're a very, very good team for a reason, obviously. I'm going to go with them number 2. For the playoffs, I'd argue that just not head-to-head game like in the Super Bowl game, but for the playoffs, I'm going to argue that the Niners have the better roster, but I also slightly built for the playoffs. But the quarterback difference is interesting as well. But they also are coming from the NFC, which, again, I want to stack these teams up against the field. I think NFC teams stacking up them against NFC teams is more logical, I suppose. So I will put the Niners at 1. The 2 worries for them about them, if I'm wrong here, it's going to be because of these 2 things. It would be because of durability. They're one of those teams. They get beat up like at any given time. Purdy, McCaffrey, Debo, these guys could be hurt. I sure hope not for any team, obviously. And then the next thing is Brock Purdy. He's been really good this year. He can play good in the playoffs. He's a guy that good teams, good defenses have game plan for pretty well, though. Put him in uncomfortable situations, disguise some coverages because he's not able to read them like the Patrick Mahomes, Matthew Stafford, these guys. You get my point. Lamar Jackson, he's not able to read them like that. And he also doesn't make very many, maybe not at all, adjustments in the passing game at the line based on what he sees. So that's an issue. And I've always been a believer with, the number 1 team has to have not just a good quarterback, a really good quarterback. So I'm kind of going against my own take here on that. But I think this team, I think this year, and again, the playoffs is a whole different game. It could be different. We just don't know yet. It's to be determined. But this year, it feels like, and it could be that it feels like the team matters more, like rather than just one player like it usually is. Well, the NFL is usually about team. It's not just one player, but more so quarterback. This year it feels a little different, but we'll see. But I always talk about can you win in multiple ways? And the Niners can win with the passing game. They can win with different types of passing games. They win with the running game, different types of running games with McCaffrey and the way they use Debo. Defensively, with the pass rush, with their secondary, even look at the secondary, Charvarius Ward. Charvarius Ward's playing as good as any corner in football right now. So it's not just about Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, these players, Armstead. It's not just about those guys. Could Chase Young come alive here? So probably the most balanced team. You could argue the Ravens, but when it comes to defense, coverage on defense, stopping the run, getting pressure after the quarterback consistently, whether it's non-blitz or blitz, blocking, passing the ball, running the ball. You combine all those things, I say Niners. I think every other team is probably missing something in there for the playoffs, not from the regular season, for the playoffs. But Purdy could make me completely wrong. I'm aware of that. Very, very, very possible. So those are my playoff rankings. Now we'll go on to the next part, which is, so I did this last year too, and these are the same concept, same exercise, playoff rankings, but by fans. So I asked our Twitter subscribers, get bonus content in tweet form. And they have been all year. I asked them to make rankings on playoff teams 1 through 14 based on the playoffs only. They did that. I combined all the rankings, and I pretty much averaged them out, and we'll see who is where. They have the Ravens at 1, Niners at 2. So I had the same thing but flipped. So those are the top 2 teams for the playoffs. We got that. And then number 3 for them is the Cowboys. I had the Cowboys a little bit lower. I'm usually higher on the Cowboys than fans, it seems like, but I guess not in this case. But I am not doubting the Cowboys. It's just some other really good teams that I feel like just got a little bit more in a playoff atmosphere. 4 for the Bills. I had them at 3. The Lions at 5. I had them a little bit lower. Really good team. The running game for them, Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, is that's what they got going for them, obviously. And they're obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown's great, and they could be explosive in the passing game. A little inconsistent there. They're very inexperienced. The defense, I think a lot of these teams beat up that defense in a playoff game, but we'll see. So that's why I was a little lower. The Chiefs I was higher on, but could they continue to look like the way they were looking in the end of the regular season? They could. I think they'll be better. Some adjustments. Dolphins right around the same part. I was higher on the Rams. The defense is better than people give them credit for. The offense is super explosive, can beat teams in several different ways. They have a genius coach on both sides of the ball. Eagles at 9, that's where I had them as well. They're impossible to rank. I had the same the rest of the way, didn't I? I did. So 9 through 14 is actually exactly the same. The Browns-Texans would be such a good matchup in the first round. If a team was going to be like, the Packers could be sneaky. I would say somebody could be sneaky. I guess the Eagles could be a sneaky team because no one's really expecting them to be good right now. But could be a first-round game, and even though people are expecting them to win that game, but should be a good first-round wild card game, I should say. So that's where the fans that's where the fans are at. I appreciate any fan in general, any viewer in general, but all the Twitter subscribers that show that extra support. And then so a lot of rankings this video. So these are, we were doing power rankings every single week. I'm sure you know that. It's based off the regular season, how teams are playing. So after 18 weeks, these are my final regular season based off the regular season, not based off how teams would match up head-to-head today or how they will be in the playoffs, just based off the regular season, how they played in the entire regular season combined. And the extra number in blue, red, or yellow is where they were ranked in my week 1 ranking. So you see some differences there. Ravens started at 8. They got to 1. 49ers in the same. 49ers, Bills, Cowboys, pretty much in the same range. Dolphins got a little bit better. Lions got better there than where they started. Browns kind of in the same range, but being how beat up they were, it was pretty impressive they got there. The Rams was a big difference. I'm happy to be wrong about that one because I was kind of predicting them to not be healthy because Stafford last year, and he didn't seem the same when he was healthy. Cooper Kupp injury, and they kind of got rid of a lot of good players. But they stayed not even fully healthy for the entire season, but they stayed healthy and played a lot better football than expected. So the Rams, who I'm really high on right now, the Chiefs started at 1, they're at 9. The Eagles started at 3, they're at 10 now. I was high on the Texans compared to most people, but they got a big boost where they ended 11. Bucs, the same thing. I thought they were really going to struggle. I mean, you take away the GOAT Tom Brady with the rest of the team that is almost the same, and they actually got better. Credit to Baker Mayfield there. Steelers, I had it dead on with that one. They started at 13. They finished at 13. Packers in the ballpark. The Bengals I had at 2. Legitimate excuse for the Bengals. Joe Burrow was injured, obviously. I had them winning the Super Bowl this year. Was actually quite confident on that. I still, if Burrow stayed healthy, I think we would be talking about it. I probably would be predicting the Bengals with the Super Bowl right now, unless they weren't in the playoffs, but I think they would be. The Colts started at 31. They went up to 16. Yeah, that was an interesting one for the Colts because I did mention that Steichen could be tough to game plan for. I think that was the case. I think it lasted a little longer than I thought. And they started off hot, and they did have a path to get in the playoffs. You look at that schedule, I think there's a lot of teams that also did not make the playoffs that probably would have made the playoffs on that path. I just didn't think they had, and they almost executed it, but I just didn't think that, my evaluation, I didn't think they had the full talent yet, and the way the season ended kind of sides with that. Minshew to Goodson, failed attempt. They need to get more talent in there. Obviously, Taylor could be in the game, but so I think the valuation was there, but the schedule and how things went during games this year kind of gave them a boost. The Saints had them at 17. They finished at 17. I thought they would play better, though. I think they would. That's kind of interesting how they ended up at the same rank. But I thought they would win that division, and they played great. They played really good at the end right here. They looked like a playoff team at the end, that's for sure. But they didn't make the playoffs. They had their hiccups. They play a little bit better this year. Seahawks kind of in the same range. The Jags were one of the more disappointing teams, definitely down the stretch. Maybe Trevor Lawrence wasn't 100%, but he looked really bad. Choke against the Titans. This was interesting. So in the original rankings, I had the Raiders, Broncos, Bears in that order, 25 through 27. But it went Raiders, Broncos, Bears, and it finishes that way. Raiders, Broncos, Bears, just a little bit higher, 20, 21, and 22. Raiders finished the year pretty strong. If it wasn't for that, they probably would have finished under where I started with them. The Broncos had a little bit of a hot streak there, which helped them, and the Bears, I thought, improved in the second half of the year. The Vikings started at 14. They finished at 23. I think, like the Bengals, I think the quarterback and other injuries being hurt was their legitimate excuse. Falcons dropped down a little bit. The end of the season poorly. Arthur Smith fired. The Jets, another team, a legitimate excuse. Aaron Rodgers got hurt to start, like right off the bat, if in case you forgot that. Would they have been? There's a chance they wouldn't have been as good as I thought they were going to be, even with Rodgers, but it really affected this impacted the season in a major way. Giants took a step down this year. They dealt with injuries, but even if they were healthy early on, like Daniel Jones, they might have finished here anyways. Titans, end of the year strong, beating the Jags, but they kind of took a dip from where they started, but not too much. Cardinals helped themselves. They started at 32. They started the year without Kyler Murray. They finished with him, so you'd expect them to be better than 32, and they were slightly better. Patriots started at 20. They finished at 29, so that's a drop down. Chargers a drop down. Justin Herbert did get hurt, so there's an excuse for them being that low, but they weren't going to be anywhere near 11 anyways. Commanders started at 22. They finished very cold. And then I am blocking the Panthers, but they started at 28. So ballpark there with them in the ballpark, finishing at 32. So there you have it for the final regular season power rankings. Always fun to kind of go back and look at where teams started and see the differences there. We had some that were exactly the same. I thought, the Rams and the Bucks made some money off this. Some teams lost some money, if you will. Texans I expected to be very sneaky. They were even better than I thought. CJ Stroud, I was very high on him. He was even better than I thought. So Jags were one of the more disappointing teams on the year. It looks like this. A lot of quarterback injuries. Teams that, where would they be if their quarterback didn't get hurt? Chargers might not be far still from that. They wouldn't be down at 30, but Jets would be much better than 25. The Vikings would be better than 23. The Bengals would be better than 15. Top of my head there for those teams, but so that'll do it for this big rankings video that we do at this time every single year. If you want to play along, give me your playoff rankings. And again, don't base it off the regular season. I know you have to use some of what you saw to judge, of course, but base it off the playoffs. What teams are capable of in the playoffs? 14-1 or 1-14, however you want to do it. We're always talking with you guys on Twitter, breaking news on there as well. Loads of content coming your way and already on the channel here in the Goat House. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.